Generally speaking, I think GERD, I think we will see less higher ratings for GERD based on how it's rated, because the new rating schedule goes up to 80, which is good because right now it's capped at 60. So it goes up to 80, but the symptom severity and the symptom criteria is more strict, which is a pun there because it's based off of esophageal stricture. Can you explain what esophageal stricture is and just give you a rundown on what GERD looks like within the new rating system of honing in on esophageal stricture?
Right. So what's happening is there's a shift. There's a couple different things that happened with the GERD proposal and now an effective date that we're seeing. For everybody out there, GERD used to not have its own diagnostic code, and they just shoved it under hiatal hernia and whatever those signs and symptoms were, and you could get up to 60. So it's important to know where we are, right? And where we're going is they're allowing, or they've created a diagnostic code specific to GERD, but there's no real rating schedule under GERD. So instead they say refer to esophageal stricture. Now, that moves you up to the diagnostic code under esophageal stricture, which is kind of hard for me to say for whatever reason. But anyway, it's 7203. And yeah, it does go up to 80%. And so for me, and I think you too, Clay, it's this, well, that's good. But then you start reading into it and you're like, well, maybe that's not good. You know, it's a little bit tighter. And, you know, we've talked about this subject before, Clay. And for those that have seen the video prior, I'm in line with you from what we talked about back then, which is essentially hiatal hernia describes GERD almost to the T. All of your signs and symptoms from, you know, vomiting and regurgitation and, you know, pain in the chest and, you know, sternum pain and heartburn. Those are all signs and symptoms of GERD under the hiatal hernia rating. Well, VA's moving that over there and forgetting about it. None of those words even apply to esophageal stricture ratings. So you may, or you may not, but again, like you always say, Clay, being educated, right? It's about being educated and being informed before you make your decision. You know, just because it goes up to 80% doesn't mean throw it at the wall and see if it sticks, because you should read it first and make sure. Now, I'm going to read directly from the rating schedule here for you on esophageal stricture at 80% and 50%, because I believe most people who are on the hiatal hernia rating schedule are at 30% or even 10. There's a handful, right, at 60, which is a sweet rating for GERD. But to get to a 50 or an 80 on esophageal stricture, at 80%, it says documented history of recurrent or refractory esophageal stricture, which just means tightening, right? So difficulty swallowing is essentially what they're saying, causing dysphagia, which is also difficulty swallowing. So tightening, difficulty swallowing, those are the two kind of main things that they're talking about, with at least one of the symptoms present. They have 3 listed. So in order to get 80%, you have to have that tightening, difficulty swallowing, and at least one of these. There's 3 to choose from. Okay, you pick. Aspiration, difficulty breathing, right? But there's more of a medical diagnosis involved with that, and you need to talk with your doctor. My suggestion, because neither one of us are doctors, is copy and paste this information, take it with you to whoever you see for your GERD, and ask them if you meet this, any of these. So aspirations 1, 2 is an undernutrition and or number 3. So number 2 is undernutrition. Number 3 is substantial weight loss as defined by 4.112 alpha and treated with either surgical correction or that PEG tube that is used. So that's to get to 80%. Now, if you meet that stuff, awesome. You could be moving from a 30% potential in GERD up to an 80 if you meet that, right? The stricture, the difficulty swallowing, and one of those 3 criteria. On 50%, and I'm going to kick it back to you for your thoughts, Clay. 50% documented history of recurrent or refractory esophageal stricture causing dysphagia with which requires at least one of the following: dilation 3 or more times per year, dilation using steroids at least 1 time per year, or esophageal stent placement. Well, look, if you have a stent placement, you know, I wouldn't be running to my doctor saying, hey, man, give me a stent because I want to get this 50%, right? But if you do have stent in place, then this is something you might want to look at. But again, if you're not sure about any of this, just take it with your doctor on your next visit. Have a conversation is my suggestion, and let them tell you if you're meeting the medical terminology here or not. What are your thoughts on that, Clay?
Yeah, so I am on both sides of the fence. I feel like I'm being pulled in two different directions right now because at one time, on one side, I love how the rating starts with two words: documented history, right? That forces you to get medical evidence, which is critical. And I like how you said, if you don't know about I'm just going to say ES. If you don't know about ES or dysphagia or all those others, just go ask your healthcare team. And within the criteria, it's documented history. So let's talk about what's not documented history. Me self-reporting to my wife, that's not documented history, right? It's got to be medical evidence. And that I do like that aspect of this particular rating system. What I don't like about it, and I truly don't understand GERD in its fullness, but I can tell you that from speaking to a bunch of people who do, you basically have esophageal stricture or you don't. And GERD is still present. There's still GERD-like symptoms and GERD diagnosis on the don't crowd. So basically what this rating schedule does, it kind of draws a fine line between, hey, if you got esophageal stricture, you're probably going to rate an increase based on Jason reading 15, 80%, probably, right? If you don't, yeah, too bad, too bad, so sad. That's basically what the rating schedule is saying to me, at least. Now, do I think GERD is favorable? That answer is still yes, and it's a weird yes, because I do believe we're going to see a lot less higher ratings. I don't think we're going to see the 15, 80%, not even as common as we would see 60%, and I would make an argument that 60% is a bit rare. So I do believe we're going to see a ton of 10% ratings for GERD now, with the addition of the IBS rating. One of the changes for GERD and IBS that is favorable, and it really drives my argument of I still think the changes are favorable for GERD, is because those that have GERD, almost everyone, not one for one, but pretty close, also have IBS. It's the same body system. That's why they were roped together. Well, now they're not. So that 10% rating for GERD and that 30% rating for IBS, that is still more than your 30% rating for GERD. Okay, so there
Right.
is a place and time where, although you don't have esophageal stricture, you can still get an increase assuming you have IBS. So I want to, unless you have anything to add for GERD, I want to transition
Yeah,
to IBS. Go ahead.
Yeah. Just a little clarification for folks that may not understand or know, which I found to be really true in this world. Right? There's so much. Look, 98% of us are not medical professionals at all. Right? Of course, you're going to have your corpsmen and your medics and your PAs and your medical folks that are in our world, but most of us weren't. So, esophageal stricture is your esophagus tightening up. Okay, so picture that. Then when we talk about dilation, like in the 30% rating requirement, right? Or the 50%, actually both, it talks about a dilation. So dilation is expanding, right? So what they do, and you would know if you had this, they drop a scope down your esophagus with a little balloon and blow it up to dilate your esophagus that was tightened, right? So just so you're aware of what they're talking about here. And again, that's why I lean on take the information to your doctor and have that conversation with them.